Content over everything.
Following the recent public announcement by UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock, in which he explained the details of how the new app Test, Track and Trace will function, with concerns being raised about privacy, we wanted to see what the general public thought about this.
Yeah, so we're here for round 2. It's at Mountsfield Park, and cameraman's about to get hit. Nah, we're here. So we're doing round 2. We spoke to a bunch of people in the park. Same again, quite a few people didn't want to speak to us. I think that's going to be kind of normal. But we got a few more people, had some good conversations, brought up some good topics, had a bit of internal inconsistency with a couple of people talking, saying things that don't really make coherent sense. But most people seem to think that the lockdown is a good thing and needs to continue, yet they recognise the huge implications that it's going to have effects on all society and their own economics. So we're going to see what we can do next. Maybe we're going to see if we can interview some people at hospitals, outside hospitals, nurses and doctors if we can. Also, there's the idea that there's going to be a protest against the lockdown at the London Eye on Saturday, this Saturday coming. So me and COE are going to be there, see what happens, see if we can document it, see if we can speak to some police as well, see what they think about it. I think that's going to be interesting. So another thing to say, all this stuff in here, I'm not trying to convince you. If you're interested, look it up, research it, do your due diligence, as they say, as it's up to you. If you've got initiative, you're going to get the advantage. So there's another thing, like we spoke to the old man over there, who seemed to think it was a good idea to give up your freedom for security. So maybe that's a question you want to ask yourself. Should you give up your freedom for a bit of safety? I would say no. That's it, man, eh? Sound. We're out. Could you give me a general view? What do you think about the lockdown?
It's one of those things, there's nothing we can do about it. We have to do as we're told. Depending on our age, like we're only allowed out we don't go shopping.
Okay.
Our daughter drops our shopping at the door for us, and I accept it the way it is.
All right.
We have to do as we're told. And I don't want us to rush back in case there be another pandemic.
I see.
Worse than before.
Is your view any different?
No, it's essential. Absolutely essential.
You think so?
I think it's got to continue for as long as is necessary. I think that's the only way that we're going to stop spreading the virus itself.
I see.
What does concern me are people walking out and about, particularly in parks, couples walking together, completely oblivious to anyone else in the park or on the path, and don't make any attempt to social distance whatsoever.
Don't you think it's extremely dangerous, the changes that we're making to our society and giving up a huge amount of our freedoms that were very hard fought for in the past, for a virus that may not actually be as dangerous as they say it is?
I believe so. It's very dangerous, and it's more dangerous than our age group.
Okay.
You know as well.
Yep.
That's why we probably be locked down longer.
Okay.
And we have to put up with it. And we're always busy at home. We don't get bored.
What is more dangerous, giving up our liberty or giving up our life?
Liberty, absolutely. In my opinion.
No.
Right.
To me,
That's
life
all right.
is more precious than giving up liberty.
So you would rather live as a slave?
I didn't say that. They were your words, not mine.
Definitely my words.
But I would sooner live than die.
Okay. That's more reason. I'd say that's reasonable.
We have 10 grandchildren, another one on the way in 3 weeks' time, up in St. Albans. But
Okay.
we can't go to see them or anything, because
Alright.
we're not allowed to go near the grandchildren at all.
Okay. So that's interesting. 10 grandchildren. That's impressive.
One on the way, another 11.
That's great. I would like to ask, some of my questions might be a little bit pointed, but that's the point of journalism, I suppose. So what I would like to say is the type of world that your grandchildren may grow up in, it will be, if we let this happen, radically different from what I have experienced and probably what you've experienced. And I would say in quite a negative way. Have you seen about the tracking app the government is trying to introduce?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I'm not sure about that, really.
Okay.
No, I have mixed feelings about that.
Why?
Because I think that is digging into people's personal life more,
I see.
Yeah, could be passed on everywhere.
Right, exactly. Are you familiar with the social credit system of China? Have you heard about this?
No.
No? Okay, just a quick, look it up, don't believe me, whatever. But what they have there is kind of like a Facebook system, but it's for all the people. And what they do is tracked by the government, everything.
Yeah.
If they do something wrong, if they speak out against the Communist Party, they can't travel, they can't buy a plane ticket, they can't get a loan from a bank. They have all these things, and it's because of this complete surveillance that allows them to do it. I'm personally very concerned about this coming to the UK, which is meant to be a bastion of freedom of speech and such like that. We're finding it's not really.
Oh, I do think we have freedom of speech here. I don't think that'll ever stop.
It's interesting because quite a few people with different views about this virus situation, they're being actively censored by the World Health Organization, by the UN, by the UK government, by the European Union, by YouTube, by Google, actively censored, including potentially this video if it gets enough views.
Getting back to your original question
sure.
okay, about the COVID-19 tracking, there was a very, very good article, and I can't remember the publication, but it was very, very recently, which raised concerns about where the data was being kept, how long it was being kept for, and what data it actually was that was being transmitted or collected on the phone and transmitted from the phone as and when.
Yes.
What to me hasn't been answered is what information is actually collected from a person's phone. What can they actually access? I mean, there was a great debate some time ago about WhatsApp getting information from people's contacts.
Yeah.
But nothing has been said about that, and that raises my concern.
Right. I would say that's definitely a legitimate concern, and something that I've noticed and many other people have noticed is that once you give ground, they take more ground, and it's very hard to get that ground back. That's something I would say we should be extremely wary of, and it's one of the main reasons why me and my friend here are trying to do this type of information gathering. So I would hope that the world that we're going to build is one based on liberty, freedom and privacy, not massive centralised government control.
Yes, that's the world I want as well.
Okay.
And for my grandchildren, for our grandchildren.
I would hope, I'm glad you said that, I would hope in light of that, you would stand against the tracking app.
Yes, that's what I said. I haven't read enough about it, but I think everyone knows too much about you anyway now with the phones and everything else, and I think that's maybe a step too far.
Okay. Well, that's great.
I can't say I would not stand against it, but I would have reservations until I had more information about it.
Okay, that's fair. Something we're also finding is that whoever has a monopoly, or more or less a monopoly on information, controls the narrative. So if you go on the BBC, I'm not sure if you watch mainstream media, but if you go on BBC, ITV, Channel 4 News, it's one narrative. Extremely dangerous, stay at home, believe the government, do what you're told. But there's many people around the world not saying that. I don't like when I see a monopoly. I like discussion, debate, argumentation. I think that's the only way you can get close to the truth. What do you think?
Yes, that is the way you get through to the truth. But there has been other debates as well, and other people aired their views and said, it's time we get out now. Everybody let out. But I think it's still too dangerous.
Okay.
What I've seen of all the deaths
Right.
in the country.
Have you had?
I believe that there has been discussion by many media points. What my concern is that a lot of negative debate or debate against what the government is doing is politically motivated on politics that are not aligned by the current government. And the debate is centred on politics and not on science.
Interesting. There's a number of kind of quite prominent scientists that have came out in the USA and in Europe talking about this virus situation, and their view is radically different from the government. It's quite hard to find.
Yeah, but you've got to understand their politics behind what they're saying. I mean, I was reading in the paper today that there are some very, very eminent scientists that have given very critical views of what the government have been doing.
Yep.
And then when you look deeper, they are very, very extreme left-wing with views, political views, totally adverse to the current government.
I see.
So are you actually listening to their scientific opinions or their political opinions?
That's right, it's very difficult to differentiate between those two, and when people have ulterior motives or things behind the scenes that we don't know about, it's very difficult. I agree with you, but I would say it's applicable across the board. There's something that you might not know is the government health minister right now, I think it's Hancock. I think he has a large number of shares in a vaccine company, and he's pushing vaccines. I'm very, very scared of that. I don't like that. There shouldn't be any, how do you call it, conflicts of interest? So that's it. I think we might leave it there. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
It's good talking with you.
Yeah, nice talking to you.
Have a good afternoon or a good day.
Bye-bye.
What do you think about the lockdown overall?
I think it needed to happen to bring all the deaths down, and I think it's going to have to keep going for a few weeks before we get back to our normal life.
Okay, cool. And have you heard about the government's new tracking app they're trying to implement? Have you heard about this?
No.
You haven't? Oh, okay. I think it was announced a couple of days ago. They're trying to trial it in the Isle of Man, I think, or the Isle of Wight, some island. What it is an app that they say it's voluntary. Everything's voluntary at the start. You'll have to download onto your phone, and it will track what you do. It will track where you go, and if you're in close proximity to somebody else who may have been infected, and this information will go to the government. What do you think about this?
I think it's a good start in being able to diagnose more people and everything. So I think if the trial goes well, it'd be really good to bring to England. And
you think so?
Yeah.
What do you think about the privacy and civil liberty implications of it? The government will know where you are at all times and what you're doing.
I think maybe if they didn't have people, they just knew this person is in proximity to these people instead of names and where they live. Just think of person 1, person 2, and that way.
The issue with that is the point would be they would know exactly who it is so that they could go and isolate them. This is in the government press releases, that if you find somebody that's been in close proximity to somebody else who may be infected, they have the legal power now to take you against your will and forcibly isolate you against your will. It's like an imprisonment. So for me, I'm very kind of scared of this. I'm very wary of it. I'm trying to gather information from the people to see what they think. So, let's get another question then. How long do you think the lockdown will last from now?
At least a month still, probably longer. Because now the sun, loads of people are coming out, and that's not helping with bringing it down, so probably quite a lot longer.
Okay. I have a few more questions. I'm not trying to... Some of my questions might seem a bit pointed, but it's not trying to get at you. But do you know the differences between a bacteria and a virus?
No, not really. Is a virus affected to more people? I don't know.
Okay, well the difference is quite profound. They're very, very different things. I studied biology back in the day, but don't believe me, these are things for you to research if you like. A virus is very, very small. It's much smaller than a bacteria. Bacteria is about the size of one of your cells, one of your body cells. Inside it has different organelles, has its own DNA, has its own cytoplasm, can move around. A virus is a piece of RNA. It's like DNA, but a wee bit different. Extremely small. They can be in the blood, they can be in the saliva, some of them can be airborne, but this one here, this COVID-19, according to the World Health Organization, it's not airborne. So another thing I'd like to say about that is viruses are destroyed by ultraviolet light from the sun. So if you had it on the bench there, after a few minutes, most likely it would be destroyed by the sun. But like I say, research these things if you can. The difference between that is really important. I think maybe one more question. What do you think? So we have this virus, we have this situation, we have this lockdown, you say maybe another month. What do you think are the other implications of the lockdown? Because it's having negative effects, economic, mental health, family breakdowns, things like that. What do you think will be the effect?
I think, well, obviously, as people know, like loads of businesses aren't doing well because they can't get out to like get to their clients and everything. So after this lockdown, it'll take a while to get back into the normal like economic life and everything. So although it's necessary, but I think everyone understands it's going to have a big impact on life afterwards.
I see. Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. That's reasonable. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. What do you think about the lockdown overall?
I think the lockdown is a good idea to prevent the virus to spread more. But overall, about this COVID-19, I don't know what to think about. Actually, I think it's beyond our reasonable thinking. I don't know what the G20 is doing.
Right.
Yeah, all the big powerful countries. Maybe there is something behind this, something more than the virus.
Right.
But so far we're hearing too many people are dying, so that's sad, basically. We haven't seen anything, but I don't know, man, it's a very sad moment. It's stressful as well.
For sure.
Yeah, it's getting 2 months now that we've stopped working, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So you say it's stressful, and the work situation. What's your work situation? Are you furloughed? Are you still working?
No, we stopped work since March 15th, and I don't know when we're going to start again. I think they said probably end of June.
Yeah, end of June.
Yeah, because I work hospitality and restaurant, and the restaurants, pubs, all these places where people go to enjoy themselves, they're going to be the last one.
Yeah, that's right.
Hopefully it's going to be a vaccine. Yeah, they said in Oxford University is trying to find something, but I don't know if it's working or not.
I see. Okay, that's interesting you mention a vaccine because, well, I worked in biology for a while. I studied biology at uni. I know a little bit about it, but something about the vaccine is usually, you can look it up. I suggest you do your research. Vaccines usually take 2 to 3 years to bring to trial, to develop, to test them on humans, and to put them out onto the market. They're saying that they can produce a vaccine in this very short period of time. Very skeptical, man. Very skeptical.
Yeah, but the thing behind this vaccine, I think, is they're trying to bring this up so they can release the lockdown, because the government is losing a lot of money now. So they're trying to open some works, saying that I don't know. I
Understand.
I just think, but as all the specialists are saying, same as you said now, that the vaccine takes a long time to produce it, especially with this COVID-19. It just came up now, this new virus. Nobody knows nothing about it. Nobody knows where it came from. They said it came from animals. Maybe they were testing something, or who knows, man? Who knows?
Do you know what I mean if I say Bill Gates?
No.
All right, Bill Gates was the founder of Microsoft.
Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Bill Gates, yeah.
Oh, it's my accent. It's my accent.
Okay.
It's my accent, mate. It's a Scottish accent. Don't worry. All right, you know the guy. Well, he's maybe you know he's trying to push vaccines all over the world, and he's had quite an interesting record. His institute, the Bill and Melinda, what do you call it? Bill and Melinda? I can't remember what it is. They got kicked out of India for some of their vaccines they were using on children for polio, and they paralysed 500,000 children. There's a lot of danger to these vaccines, and Mr. Bill Gates likes to push this on the world. Again, like I say, I'm very skeptical of this. And the government, if you're not aware, has recently changed some of their laws with the emergency powers to say that you can get vaccinated against your will. What do you think of that?
Well, you mentioned Bill Gates. I think he's doing. I mean, he has plenty of money. He doesn't know what to do with them. So I think it's good for him that he's using them to sponsor and to help all the scientists work together, because he's funding the money. He's giving his money.
Yes.
To help on the research and everything. I think he's doing good. I don't think he has nothing to do with
with a vaccine. He's just giving the money. This is my opinion.
Okay.
Maybe he has something to do with that. I don't know. That's too far from my.
Okay. I suggest if you've got time, if you're interested, please look into it, man. That's why we're speaking to people, trying to get some information out there, see if people can look at non-government sources, because he's part of an organisation that funds vaccines. It's called Gavi. I don't know what it stands for. It's GAVI, and he's very interested in vaccines. Also, there was a famous or an infamous TED talk with Bill Gates,
I've seen that.
right,
Years ago, yeah.
where he talks about how we need to depopulate the world, and if we do a great job on vaccines, we will reduce this by blah 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 %. So it's very strange. Something else that happens with vaccines, there's a country in Africa called Tanzania, and he had a lot of vaccines there.
The truth, I mean, sometimes heard, but it's too many people, yeah.
You think so?
Of course.
Interesting. Why?
What do you mean why? There's not enough resources on this planet to hold all. I mean, we're going to up to 8 billion now. And more, there is no restrictions about, having 1 or 2 children. Not in Europe, but let's say in East. It's too many people.
Isn't it interesting that
I don't think we should kill them.
well,
That's the wrong thing, getting vaccines against people's will to reduce the population. That's not the right thing to do. I think people shouldn't make 10 children if they can't afford to, and if there is not enough resources on the community and the country where they live in. Basically here, I can't afford more than 2 kids. Why I should have 8 or 10 and get benefits and make everything more complicated and struggle for food? And I mean, these things people should understand and realize that there are too many people, in my opinion.
okay. Well, interesting. You said not in Europe, because from my knowledge, I think most places in Europe have a falling population, which is a huge problem. We're not having enough children to replace the population.
Well, who says that?
Well, you can find it. There's a lot of statistics on births and deaths. The birth rate for the UK and for Japan, it's below replacement, so I hear, which is very dangerous, because once you get people very old, there's nobody to look after them, there's nobody to pay the taxes, there's nobody to keep that going.
Yeah, but they're saying this, but why the number is increasing? Why from 7 billion we're going to 8 billion? Slowly we're going to go to 9 billion. It doesn't match, basically.
And maybe China and India, for example.
It's not just China and India. It's plenty of countries that, especially where I'm from, the population is going down in my country, but we're migrating. So basically, the number is going up. Overall, in global.
In the world, yeah.
Yeah, in the world, but. In some countries is going down, obviously. I don't know, maybe I don't know the reasons why, but I think we are too many people in this. I'm not saying it just because I think so. I've read some things, I heard some scientists, and what they're saying, I agree with them.
Okay, cool. I have another question for you. Have you heard about the government's new tracking app that they're wanting people to download on their phones?
To track what?
That's a great question. To track you, to track where you are and what you're doing.
You don't need to upload a tracking app to track you. As long as you have your phone with you, you're tracked 24/7.
Yes. The difference is this would be voluntarily. To get that information about where you are, you have to do it illegally. But this app would let the government track you with your consent. That's the difference. Well, what I mean is that you said you can be tracked with your phone. It's true. But to get that information, you have...
Legal.
It's not. Not from my knowledge.
The government can track you anytime he wants.
Okay, so let's change the question. They're trying to get this app. They're trialing it on the Isle of Wight. They want people to download it so they can see who's standing between people to see if they have the virus.
Oh, because of the COVID-19, you say?
Yeah.
What difference is that going to make?
Well, it's the idea that if a government can know where you are at all times, it's very difficult to have privacy or any sort of liberty, really.
No one is going to download that, and if they're trying to bring this up because of COVID-19 to check if people are keeping the distance, they're just going to have to spend more money on officers to. I mean, if people come together, they have to bring people to separate you. I don't think it's just a mess up thing. I don't think it's gonna work.
Okay.
Only if they put a chip on everyone's. People who are going to get checked in hospital, maybe they're getting a chip on their body, and
Maybe it's in the vaccine.
maybe it's in the vaccine. Who knows?
So be careful, brother, eh? I think we're living in very strange times, man.
Yeah, we are, man. Beyond our reason. Honestly, beyond our reason. I just checked. I saw 2 weeks ago now that America has confirmed that aliens are among us. I mean, they've been
You've
among
seen the
us.
UFOs?
Yeah. I mean, they've been among us for ages, but they just confirmed it now. I don't know what to think, man. It's too. If you go deep on this one, you lose the reality. That's basically me. I lose the reality where I am now. Get too nervous and stressed. Things that I can't control. I just have to stay with the crowd of the sheeps that I.
Oh, don't do that, bro. Don't do that, man. I got something. Initiative always wins. Always. Don't be part of the crowd, man.
We don't know what to fight for, man.
What do you feel, man? What does your gut tell you?
I don't know. I have to study more, but what we're studying basically is what they want us to study. So it's too deep, I think.
Aye, cool. When we leave that one there, definitely keep looking into it, man, and don't go with the sheep.
No problem.
Thanks for your contribution, eh? Cheers. What do you think about the lockdown overall?
Well, I think it's been necessary. I think that people haven't maybe taken it as seriously as they should. I'm a little bit disappointed that as a nation we've got the highest number of deaths in Europe. So I think that extending the lockdown is a good idea. And that's all.
Okay. What do you think? No, don't worry. What do you think about? I'm shit asking questions. What do you think about the other effects that this lockdown might have? Because obviously there's economic, there's psychosocial, there's having family breakdowns and people losing their mind and shit.
Well, I think there's definitely major effects of this, and there's going to be a recession. It's bad for your mental health. But we've been given an opportunity to go out and exercise and to go out, and I think that if you can make the most of that, then you can stay sane. But obviously that is a major concern, isn't it? The mental health thing. But in terms of I'm just sick of people talking about this economy stuff, because it is making a difference. But like, our entire economy runs on money. Money's just it's not a real thing anymore, like the government can print money if people want money. I think that it's ridiculous. I think, heck, if it's inflation that happens, then that's what happens. But we need to think about the needs of everybody first. And if we're an economy that runs on money at the moment, like if people want money, then they can just print more money.
Okay. What would it run on if it wasn't money?
If it wasn't running on money, then I think we'd have to all. I mean, I haven't gone to the farms yet to help, but we should all be doing that.
Okay. So like a collectivist society.
A collectivist society sounds much more interesting to me than the capitalist society that we currently live in.
Okay, fair enough. And so, interesting. We have, as you mentioned, there's a period of time that we've been graciously allowed to leave our homes in order to exercise.
Absolutely.
What do you feel about being treated as a prisoner or subject? Because I was under the impression that all men and all women were born free and not under the restrictions of any man, and saying you're allowed to go outside, I didn't sign up for that. What do you think about that?
I think that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that it's such a hard balance to cut between keeping us safe and letting us feel like we're free. The problem is that this lockdown is such a huge change that it feels like we're having our liberty taken away.
Feels?
I mean, the problem is my lifestyle is that I work from home, and so it hasn't impacted me in the same way that perhaps people who have to work in an office or people who work jobs in restaurants that have been closed down. Like that's where it's hitting hardest.
Huge sector.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's so hard to enforce to get down to the nitty-gritty of specific roles, but I think we need to come up with a better solution for the lockdown in the long run. It needs to be extended to an extent, But I think we do need to help people. Like, we need to provide for people who don't have, who are not having during this time. We can't. I've read something about the cutting down the furlough to incentivize people to get other jobs or something like that today, and I was just, that's not the solution at all. Like, we should just be paying everybody. We should just be helping everyone out. Not just paying, but we should just be making sure that everybody has what they need, whether that be, helping people by donating to food banks, giving to homeless people, making sure that your friends and family and people in your community are fed and looked after, and make sure everyone's needs are being met.
Okay, I see. Are you aware of the government granting £10,000 to all MPs, allowing them to work from home?
Oh, I am, and I'm not into it. I think it's just crazy what the stuff that they get. Like what's happened. They're basically on holiday. It's awful. It's a shameful time for British politics, in my opinion.
I see. I would also say for the concepts of freedom and liberty, it's a very, very, very dark time. Very dark time with some of the things I already mentioned. Have you heard about the government tracking app that they're trying to introduce at the moment?
Yes, I think it's appalling that they're not using Apple and Google, who have the best technology, the best security measures for this. I think it's crazy that the government's just hiring some random company to do it. It sounds like profiteering to me.
Okay, interesting angle. I come from a different angle. Would you consent to being tracked in your daily life at all times by centralised government power?
No,
Well,
absolutely not.
Well,
But I would trust it with a company that encrypts data correctly and puts the security measures in place that trusted people can look after our data.
okay. There's been numerous times, obviously, I'm asking pointed questions, I'm not trying to be patronising, it's a difficult balance to cut.
It's totally fine.
But with a little bit of knowledge, of history of dictatorships and communist and fascist regimes, having a complete control grid over your populace, knowing where they are at all times, maybe a social credit system like China, this to me is the absolute death of liberty. What do you think about that? Because you know the social credit system, right, of China?
I'm not massively familiar with it, but I understand the control that is had there, and the way that everything is controlled by the government. That there really isn't much freedom.
So you don't support this?
I don't support this. No, I think it's like the idea of being able to keep track of who's infected or not is great. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you're surrendering your data voluntarily to the government. That you're not even selling it to them. There's nothing for it in the long run. What's to stop them from just keeping all that data and keeping track of us?
No, nothing at all. And it's been theorised that the outbreak has been. There's many ways to look at it. The outbreak has been deliberately exaggerated in order to bring in these authoritarian plans in order to gain a complete hold over society. There's various aspects on that. I'm not sure if you've encountered any alternative media sources, because there's a number of doctors and medical professionals around the world speaking out, and you definitely will not find this on mainstream media for obvious reasons, as they seem to be bought and paid for, like the BBC. Are you familiar with any of those? Dr. Bashar, Andy Kaufman, anyone like this, Dr. Shiva?
I need to look this up.
do?
It's really interesting to me that that we've had such a strange. Right, just making sure he's not doing that. Yeah, it's so weird because the government has not only completely mishandled controlling the outbreak.
Mishandled.
I think they have. I think it's the herd immunity thing is crazy. Like that's bad.
I know it's actually how it works, though.
It is how it works, but I suppose it's about making people feel safe in the right ways.
Would they need to feel safe if they weren't deliberately terrorised? Because every day there's death reports, more people dead. That's kind of propaganda, isn't it?
My sister works in a hospital in North London, and a friend of mine, he cleans hospitals in London. Well, he's doing it during the outbreak to help out, and it's like the NHS has been crushed by this. Like, it really has. It's there's the overcrowding is insane to me. I mean, it's recently gotten better for her. It's recently, because she's not actually she worked in children's A&E, so paediatric A&E, and there was at one point they were going to move her illegally to work in the ICU, to work on adults that she's not trained to do, and yeah, it seems like it's the A&E's actually gotten back to normal. Like, people are bringing in their kids for stupid things like stuck up noses again.
Aye.
But yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard thing for me because, there's one side that this outbreak's happened. The other side is like now, the government seems to be seeing what they can. I don't know, like the data thing and a few other, and the MPs. Like I don't know, it just feels badly handled. But I don't know which country has been the best example of how it's been handled. You know,
Sweden.
Right. So they haven't had an enforced lockdown, right?
They haven't had any.
No, but Sweden's not as populated as the UK. It's not as tightly packed in. It's the problem is every country's different. Every culture is different. It's just it's a mess. It's all a big mess.
Okay, a couple of other things. It's interesting talking to you. Do you remember the war in Iraq, the second Gulf War?
The war in Iraq, the second Gulf War, are triggered by 9/11. Are you talking about that one, or are you talking about the one before that?
The second Gulf War.
The second Gulf War.
Yeah,
Okay.
they say triggered by 9/11, but that's a bit funny one. But you remember the WMDs,
Yes.
and remember the dossier that was
Right.
found to be fraudulent.
Absolutely.
And you remember the doctor who committed suicide coincidentally right after it was published.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And how it's come to light now that information there was entirely fabricated and there were no weapons of mass destruction and we annihilated a country, killed millions of people, made a lot of money. And what did they say? Mistakes were made. What are they saying now? Oh, sorry about that. Mistakes were made. You disagree?
No, I agree.
Oh, okay.
Just this makes me feel a bit sick.
Right, it should. It should. That's a relief. So I would say, in light of that, in light of huge lies, massive deaths, and a lot of money made that we have records of, who's to say that's not what's happening right now? I'm not saying that people aren't dying. I'm saying that you can easily use a crisis to benefit you.
I'm a big fan of theories of disaster capitalism, and I think there's probably quite a lot of that happening right now. I think there's definitely a degree of that. There's people who are looking at this and thinking, this is great for me personally.
Perhaps it's even deeper. Perhaps it's those who control the media, and how the BBC is an arm of the government. Maybe they're hand in hand putting out propaganda that wants to make people terrified to go outside of their homes in order to maybe fleece them a bit more. You know, I would say maybe look at it from that perspective as well.
Okay.
That's what I would suggest, because there's a lot of information out there that contradicts the government line. It's being actively censored and suppressed, and that's a big red flag in my book.
Yeah. I think the problem with the media is that it is either the BBC is there's so many people that are part of the BBC, but of late I feel like it has been like I don't want to pay my license fee anymore. Like I'm not paying that anymore. Not after the past election. Not after the way things are not being reported. Lots of things are not being reported, and I don't know.
Do you remember the Jimmy Savile scandal?
I do.
That should have been the end of the BBC right there.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous. It's crazy to me that so many these horrible people are being protected, and it happens. And I'm so sick of these people, bad people, failing upwards in our government, in our media, and our society. All these horrible people that seem to just continue to be given platforms and seem to just be making a lot more money and being more popular.
Sounds like the whole system's rigged, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, even if there are people there that don't want, that are trying to work to unrig the system, I just burn it all down and rebuild it. That's a lot of work. How do we do it?
I see. Okay, yeah, for sure. Maybe I have one more question. Have you had any encounters with the police recently, or have you seen any encounters with the police?
Just car accidents.
Oh.
Lots of car accidents.
That's surprising,
Yeah,
considering
yeah.
the lack of cars.
Oh no, there's a lot of cars. If you're on your way to Sainsbury's and Sydenham, or if you're going down to the Catford Island roundabout, there's always lots of cars there. There's so many accidents. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's
the face masks.
What in the cars?
Reducing the oxygen intake. It's a real thing, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
In any case, myself and a few friends of mine, we've encountered a couple of things happening with the police here. People call it an overreach of power, and in fact it's not, because it's written into the law now, but because of the emergency powers. By the way, I'd suggest you look that up.
Emergency powers.
So what I've seen, for example, I've seen mothers and children being told to leave parks because they've been sitting on the ground for too long or too close. I've seen an old man get hassled repeatedly by the police until he was forced to leave the park. I've seen many things like this. Also, police officers riding around on giant war horses telling people what to do.
Oh, yeah, they come through Mountsfield quite a lot.
I wonder,
The horse police.
what's the necessity of having war horses? Because
You've got to look after the horses. They've got these horses that are probably used for, I don't know, used at concerts or riot purposes. And the horses need exercise. So why not?
they're a bit intimidating though, are they not?
Absolutely. My dog's terrified of them. Yeah, it's a strange one, but those horses, they're beautiful things. They need exercise. So I understand. I've seen riot vans going through parks. It's a bit weird. I've seen it at Burgess Park, and I've seen it here, I think. It might have been a different park.
Isn't it weird how we've had record gang violence and knife crime and things like this, and I never really saw any police, and now I've seen more than I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I mean, they ain't got anything else to do, have they?
Yeah, it's pretty strange. One more thing I'd like to add, it was similar to the Jimmy Savile thing I was saying, is that, did you watch that interview, I don't know if it was BBC or if it was Channel 4, I can't remember, with Prince Andrew?
I didn't see it, no.
Look it up, man. Watch
no,
that shit.
I don't like Prince Andrew.
Well, it's probably not going to change your opinion. And the whole Epstein thing. And I wonder why those people aren't getting investigated while a poor old man sitting on a bench is getting told to fuck off. I'm a bit... that riles me, you know what I mean?
There's a lot of bureaucracy in this country, unfortunately. It's a tough one. I don't know how we bring these people to justice.
Okay. Well, try and, maybe if you've got time, if you want to, try and look up some alternate sources about people giving different views on the it's good for everything to get a different perspective. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go around, ask people's opinions and see what's going on. And thank you for the conversation.
Mate,
We'll leave that there.
I feel like I wasn't able to express feelings enough or thoughts.
Well, at least
But,
you talk to us. Everybody else
yeah.
is terrified.
Well, you know, I've got sanitizer, but I wash my hands anyway. I don't cough on people, so it's all good. And you're not going to cough on me.
No, probably not. All right, cool. Just one more thing. You know that antibacterial spray does nothing against viruses, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, cool.
Just kills bacteria.
Saves my sanity. Let's end that one there, right? Cheers.
Mate.
I would shake your hand, but you know it's a crime these days. Nah, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it.
I'm not counting. I'm just kidding. My dog's going to give it to you. All right.
There we go. Cool. So let's see. What do you think about the lockdown overall?
Well, it's necessary, but it's kind of annoying because I want to go out and see my mates, but it's got to be done, isn't it, really?
Why do you think it's necessary?
Well, there's a global pandemic going around where people are getting ill and people are dying, so...
Have you looked into any alternative sources that aren't government sources about the pandemic?
Not so much, no.
Okay, because we're trying to go around and speak to people, maybe suggest it, because there's quite a lot of people that have came out, some medical professionals around the world, especially in the USA, that are saying it's not so serious and things like that. So if you've got time, maybe check that out or whatever, but I have a few questions. Have you seen the government's app that they're wanting people to download, tracking app?
No.
You haven't?
No.
They announced it a couple of days ago. They're going to trial it in one of the islands in the south of England, where it's going to track everywhere you go and what you're doing to see if you're in proximity to somebody that may be infected.
And then if they get infected, then they'll be able to tell the people who's got that app that they need to self-isolate. Yeah?
Right, yeah, or forcibly isolate you, which is another thing that's been passed in the new emergency powers.
Right.
All right, so it's interesting that people haven't heard about that, because I would say it's a huge thing. This is a privacy breaching app of the highest level. Like, are you familiar with the social credit system of China? No. Okay. It's like a dystopia brought to the earth, where everybody's tracked, what you do is registered, and if you do something the government doesn't like, many things. It could be walking over the road that isn't on a traffic light. It could be saying something against the Communist Party, and you can take some of your credits away. You can't travel, you can't buy a plane ticket, you can't open a business, many things like that. So I'm very concerned, and people with me are concerned that this idea may be coming to the UK. Anyway, so what do you think about the effect of the lockdown? You say it's annoying, you can't see your mates and stuff like that. What about the economic effects? What do you think is going to happen with that?
Well, yeah, it's going to affect the economy hugely, but it's nothing I don't think that the English economy for sure cannot bounce back from.
You think so?
Yeah.
Why?
do you mean why?
Because we're primarily like a service-based economy.
It'll be difficult for a while, but it's got to be done. It's saving lives.
Okay, you've seen, of course, the messaging systems around the place. Like on the parks here, you have "Stay home, save lives." On the floor, they've started spray painting it 2 meters apart. "Stay home, save lives." On all of the government broadcasts, "Stay home, save lives." Yeah. You see, this type of messaging system is it's a mimetic system where you repeat the same phrase as many times as possible, and it gets stuck in your mind. It's a propaganda technique, and you could say if it was a legitimate pandemic that's really killing people dropping like flies, maybe it's the right thing to do. I haven't seen that personally. I worked with biology for a while. I studied my master's in it, and we worked with some dangerous bacteria in the lab. And when we worked with this shit, E. coli, we had full respirators, full biohazard suits in a sealed room. And I don't see any of that. If you remember Ebola, the outbreak of Ebola in Central Africa, the guys full hazmat suits, people panicking.
The people who work in the hospitals are wearing that sort of equipment, aren't they?
Well, that's what I've found is not actually the case. The paramedics aren't wearing it, the nurses aren't wearing it, and this little paper mask, it's not going to help you, because a virus is like how do you call it?
Hazmat suits to everyone, can they?
No, well, they probably can't. But one of the things that I've been encouraged to talk about is the differences between virus and bacteria. Do you know the difference?
No, I'm not a scientist.
Right. Okay, it's a really important one, because if you go to the shop and you see this antibacterial spray and gel and things like this, it will have absolutely zero effect on a virus. No effect at all. It's in a completely different order. So that's something people need to know. And these masks that people are wearing, it can catch droplets of saliva, mucus, but a virus can go straight through it. The pores in the mask are huge compared to the virus. Right. It's absolutely tiny. So it's things like that where I think it's very strange the government ain't telling people that. Antibacterial won't help you. Masks won't help you. They're not mentioning that, and I'm concerned. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Cool. Well, a little bit of education there. So, in any case, you need to go? No problem, mate. Cheers.